We're continuing Mishlei Perek Pasuk Lamed. So we're talking about how a person should, the best he can, stay away from sin, stay away from different lusts that drive you to sin. And here, the next pasuk continues on this vein, but something a different angle. Lo yavozu laganav ki yignov lemale nafsho ki yirav. It's not going to be embarrassing for a robber to steal if to satisfy his soul if he's hungry. If a person's hungry and he steals, he justifies it. I was hungry, I'm poor, I'm hungry, I need to go and steal. That's the only way I can eat, I have to survive. So they justify their actions. And even though we know, of course, stealing is something that's so bad, right? And again, stealing could be put in, you can put any other type of avera in there, but when a person justifies it, it makes himself feel good, even though the action is so bad. And this is something that is, when a person justifies, a person could justify anything. He could justify murder. The Nazis, Hamas, Yimach Shemam, they could justify, why, this is a rightful cause, right? So this is something that is very dangerous. That justifying and getting out of things that these are asur things. So or excuses or ways out. We have to always go back and boil down to: is this allowed or this is not allowed? I might have some sort of justification. I might have a good excuse. There's the teacher, the person comes later. You have all the excuses in the book, but there's a time and there's sometimes there's extreme excuses. There's big excuses. Of course. But we always have to go back and boil down to: is this allowed or is this not allowed? And now am I just trying to bend the rule or break the rule? Also, people feel hungry in a case of addiction, and addiction leads people to do crazy things. There was, talking about stealing and addiction, I was reminded of the story, and I know Magen David, I wasn't here at the time, but I got affected by this also, where there was someone that was stealing the silver of Sifrei Torah, and they were doing it in many shuls. It's unbelievable. And they were doing it to feed their drug addiction. It was addiction. And Baruch Hashem, the guy got cleaned up, and now he's back on his feet now, and he wouldn't think of doing something like that ever again. And he's really cleaned up. But addiction leads you to do crazy things. So this is kind of a justification, or when you're hungry. But that hunger, how does the hunger come? Does it come through poverty? Does it come through addiction? Right? So at the end of the day, though, we do have to boil down to: is this thing allowed or not allowed? And if it's not allowed, we've got to stay as far as we can away from it. And no justification could be like, why is this thing? Now, let's say eating al kosher. Let's give that example, right? So this is not allowed. I could justify it's expensive, and I had people tell me it's expensive, Rabbi. I have to eat this. Okay, now there are some justifications that are allowed. For instance, the doctor told me if I don't eat this, I'm going to die. Pikuach nefesh or things like that. Okay, so there are certain justifications for sure, even against mitzvot. But for the most part, we have to boil down to: is this allowed? Is this not allowed? And then make sure that I don't violate, and recognize that sometimes my hunger drives me to do things that are not allowed, and we have to make sure to boil it down and realize: is this allowed or not allowed, and act accordingly. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashya Omer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu לזכות את ישראל לפיכך חיבר להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר קדיש